Welcome to NAIFA's Advisor Today podcast series, where we focus on how financial advisors work, live, and give to their local communities and our greater financial services industry. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, everyone. This is Chris Gandy, your co-host of Advisors Today podcast, where we come together for the purpose of uplifting the industry and professionals like yourself with our wonderful co-host, Suzanne Kirawan. Hi, Suzanne. How are you?
I'm good, Chris. Good to be here.
We have a wonderful guest today. Before we get to our wonderful guest, Mr. Harry Hoopis. Suzanne, who's our sponsor for today's program?
Well, it is none other than the John Newton Russell family, who is the founders of the John Newton Russell Award. And I think Harry might talk about it a little bit during today's podcast, because he is one of the recipients, actually the last recipient of it. And we do have, we haven't announced it yet, but we selected who the next winner of this prestigious award is. And that will be announced in the next couple of months. But it's suffice it to say, you have to have done a few things to earn this one. So we're excited to talk to Harry today, who's a legend, and talk about some of the work that he's done and how it is that he was named the John Newton Russell Award winner.
Great. So without further ado, I put my tie on because I said, I can't let Mr. Hoopis outdress me, but none other than the guru, and I've called him the Don of insurance and financial services for a long time because he dresses the part. None other than Mr. Harry Hoopis. So, Mr. Harry Hoopis, how are you?
I'm great, Chris, and it's good to see you again.
Okay, good. So let's start off. Thank you so much to your commitment to this industry. I mean, this industry is one where, people come, they leave, but you have been in the industry for a period of time. Can you share with us kind of a little bit about your journey and really why you stuck so heavily to financial services and the insurance business as a whole?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Chris. And it's a long story because it actually began in 1968. I was a student at the University of Rhode Island studying accounting, and I had to take a class in summer school in order to graduate in 4 years. And so that meant I gave up my construction job, which was paying an amazing $4.25 an hour. And I went down to the placement office looking for something to fit in around my class schedule. I would have done anything, a waiter, you name it. And when I walked in the placement office, there's a sign on the wall in big print. It says, sell life insurance part-time, $75 a week, guaranteed 10 weeks. I quickly did the math. That's $750 for the summer. Figured I'd learn something about life insurance. I could work in my father's grocery store on the weekends, and he paid me. And then I borrowed another $1,000 from the bank, and I was all set for my senior year in college. And lo and behold, this was the precursor of Northwestern Mutual's internship program. They called it a part-time job. I had a part-time agent's contract, but I just fell in love with it immediately and went full-time in June of 1969. A very funny story this morning, Chris. I was in my office here making some notes, and I wanted to draw some straight lines. So I reached in and I pulled out my ruler. See that there?
Yeah.
It says MDRT Crusade, sponsor Northwestern Mutual, 1971. So this has been in my desk drawer for 52 years. Recognizing the first year that I qualified for the $1 Million Roundtable, which was in 1970, and so was the 71st, 1971 Roundtable. So in the beginning, people, it was an internship in many ways. I learned a great deal, but what people told me immediately was sell 100 lives in your first year and you'll be successful. And in our agency back in Rhode Island, there were 200 or 300 lives producers. And not knowing any better, I thought, boy, these people look like they've got it together. They're organized, successful. They belonged in a country club, which I had no idea what a country club was. And I said, I'm going to just do what they do. And what they did was they had high activity, got a lot of referrals, and come hell or high water, they were going to sell 100 lives a year, which when you think about it is, it's a couple a week. And as you well know, Chris, because you're a big producer, you just got to stay with it. So in my first year, I managed to sell 100 lives. And remarkably, that ranked me 108th in the Northwestern Mutual. I didn't even realize there were that few at the time writing 100 lives. No one showed me the record book, so I had nothing to go by except what a couple other guys that were more or less my mentors in the earliest stages. And what they told me that kind of brought this about was they said, practice the 4 100s. And so for those of you that might be familiar with the Granum point system, basically it was to achieve 5 points a day. And you did that with referrals, appointments kept, fact finders, closing interviews. And they said, if you could have 100 points a month consistently using that formula, that would lead to 100,000 of premium. And that would lead to 100,000 eventually of first year commission. So that became known as the 4 100s, which we practiced in my organization for many, many years. So that was really how we got this thing launched.
Well, Harry, I'm fortunate enough to know you now since I started in the business in '90, and you had kind of I would call it kind of a mentor, kind of mentee relationship with who was the general agent who I was in his office, John Wright, right down in
John Wright, yeah.
But we actually had an opportunity to come to meetings in Chicago and get a chance to work to meet the Al Granum, who I believe was in your office. And so when you talk about history of the business, can you share with us a little bit about what it was like to actually work as close to Al Granum as you did? Because you guys created some cool stuff and you propelled the business in a way where it was more cerebral about the business than it was about just selling insurance.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to. My relationship with Al Granum began when I was appointed the general agent in Evanston, Illinois. Al was already famously the biggest Northwestern general agent in downtown Chicago. As everyone would know, 208 South LaSalle Street was made famous by Al. And in my earliest days as a general agent, I went to call on Al. Now, we'd be friendly competitors. We're the same company. He's the old legend. I'm the new guy that, whose first training class of 3 people failed within 90 days. So, it was uncertain as to whether I'd be around or not. And I went down to visit Al, and he brought out a set of tapes, 12 cassette tapes. And he said, Harry, I've just finished producing these. This is everything I know about being successful in the business. I'm going to give you a set. He said, if you listen to him or you don't like him, you can turn him over and record on the other side. It's just what he said. Otherwise, do whatever you want. Well, I went home. I had 100 copies of that 12-pack copied, and that became the basis of my training program. So Al retired, must have been 15 years later, at the age of 62, and he didn't want to be in the way of his successor. And I was out in Northfield, which was rather convenient to his home. So he asked if he could join me. Imagine that he's asking if he could come in office with me in my office building. And he did that, and he did that for 15 years. He did it until driving was an issue for him, and he couldn't do it anymore. But the thing about Al was he was always on, and he had his very guiding principles, about activity that never changed. And we would joke, I'd say, I'd have a guest in the office. It could be you, for example, when you came up with John Wright. And I say, Al, you got a few minutes for Chris Gandy? And you just kind of touch him on the chest and he starts his speech. And he tells you how, activity is going to improve your performance. And so he was automatic all the time. Just a wonderful guy and really a key mentor in the early days for me.
Yeah, I remember when I remember we had a club because I started at the same company, and there was a club that when you hit 100 lives, there was kind of this, you would go to the Al Granum, I don't know what it was, but it was like a one day with Al Granum, and you guys put it on, and you guys would send your people and other people would send their people. And this was kind of like the group. Yeah. And I was in that group. So that was kind of cool to kind of say, okay, well, wait a minute. The guy who wrote the book, the manual, this is that guy. That's him. Right. Yeah. So I remember that like it was yesterday, but you know, what a blessing it was to be able to say that we worked with him. Now we turned the page, and we turned the page to your success. And you spent a lot of time as a general agent. You spent some time as an agent. Tell us a little bit about that transition, and now the transition to being part and creating this thought leadership of the Hoopis Performance Network and the thought behind that. We did interview Joey Davenport, who is fantastic in the industry and a real, you know, sales guy and great activity. But the process started with the idea of from you. So we want to hear from you what that process was like in this kind of strategy of doing this, because this is a way you could have retired. You could have said, hey, you know, guys, I'm done. I've done my thing. I've done it for 30, 40 years, you know, put your hat on and say, hey, I'm gonna ride off in the sunset. But you decided, hey, you know what? I'm gonna create something new and different to continue to educate the industry about similar to the things we learned. So I'll be quiet, but my whole point is that we want to understand the journey from being an agent. When did you decide to, hey, I'm going to go into management and teach others how to do this? And then you hired from that. What then tapped you on the shoulder to say, let's create something different like the Hoopis Performance Network?
Yes. Yeah. Well, let's go to the beginning quickly and talk about my earliest days in the field. Graduated, went full-time, as I mentioned. You know, I did 100 lives. I qualified as a qualifying member of the roundtable. And during that period of time, I began to pursue CLU. And I actually received my CLU in September of 1974. And that in those days, I'm not sure about the rules today. You had to have 3 years in the business to get the awards or the designation. So I really worked as hard as I could to pass the 10 exams at that time to get my CLU, because I believed that the education would equal confidence, and that I needed to have confidence to be tops in sales. So that little piece of background. I finished the CLU designation, and about that time, the home office asked me to go work in the home office in Milwaukee. And I was there for 3 years, 2 weeks, 1 day and an hour, and learned a lot about the business, and was fortunate to be appointed as general agent in Evanston, Illinois, as I mentioned. When I became general agent, almost immediately we created a mission statement for our organization. And it said to create, our mission was to create an environment where agents at that time became morphed to advisors over the years. Create an environment where agents can grow and continue to grow personally, financially, and professionally. And so that became the mantra. And the 3 values of the organization were passion, commitment to long-term growth, and personal responsibility. So that became the 3-legged stool upon which we built our education program. And I've often said over the years, the most important words in the mission statement were continue to grow. You see, I think agents, the reason many leave the business is they get bored with the business. After a while, you're kind of writing lives and you're not challenged. And believe it or not, as difficult as it is for many to get started, after they get it going, they kind of lose interest. So you have to continually challenge yourself. At CLU exams, all of the American college programs, any other opportunities for personal growth and development. Of course, we have all the required regulatory exams today as well. So that was the basis. what that led to in my organization was what we internally called the Hoopis University. Ultimately, that's what Joey Davenport came from the home office to run in our agency. Now, I haven't told this story in a while because people look at me like I've got 3 years. We actually charged the agents a tuition to be in the agency, and every agent paid $100 a month that went into the pot that funded our education program. Because what we did was beyond what anyone I knew of was doing. What did that mean? It meant that we would have personal speakers come into the agency, like Bill Cates, like Joe Jordan, Gail Goodman, long list of people. I mean, more than you can imagine. And these people would come in and make presentations. Even in those days, it was $5,000 to $10,000 for a day with these folks. No general agent I knew of had that kind of money, but the agents in my organization saw it as a benefit for themselves to the extent that they were all willing to pay $100. It was a zero-sum game. We did an accounting at the end of the year. We spent every dime and more that came in, but it gave us that ability. And so ultimately what happened is those contacts, those people that like Bill Cates and Joe and others that came into the agency once or twice a year, they became the basis for the Hoopis Performance Network. Because once we were introduced to the learning management platform that we currently are on, then we had the talent. Because I would ask Bill, I said, Bill, would you mind, giving us some of your knowledge so we can put it on video? These people quickly decided this was a good thing to do. And then we went to friends that were advisors and agents, top producers, and we would ask them if they'd contribute. And our first clients, if you will, were other agencies. And then before you know it, those agencies, there were enough of them in a company, and then the companies would buy it. And we continue to this day, 14 years of 5 new videos every single month, of which you've been one of our most recent releases, to great acclaim, by the way. So congratulations. And so that was the basis. Now, what happens is if you have a good program, and I think we do, and it's reasonably priced because we have volume, where we have over 100,000 people on the system today, 60 or 70 companies in nearly 30 countries, 5 or 6 languages. If a program is of value, then people keep referring us to others. And so today we represent most all of the U.S. companies. And then I mentioned the Canadians, of course, and we have a whole team that's working in Latin America now, and the Asian marketplace is booming. So it just spreads because it's good, simple, common sense. I'm going to hear from the best consultants in the business. I'm going to hear from top of the table, quarter of the table producers almost exclusively. And where can you find that? We have nearly 3,000 videos in the library now to solve nearly every problem that an advisor or a leader has, for that matter. So that's the path. That's how it got here.
Well, I think what it does solve in the industry is the disconnect between the companies, right? And you've seen it, right? So I've been to a couple companies and I've seen the educational play, it's in sports, right? When I was yay high to a tadpole, is that they teach you the fundamentals when you start, right? They don't teach you how to pass by, in sport basketball, they teach you how to dribble, pass, and shoot. They don't teach you how to dribble, how to throw. The first thing they don't do is teach you how to pass behind your back and, hook shot. So they teach you the fundamentals, right? And so if Northwestern Mutual was good at teaching how to do 100 lives, Mass Mutual might have been good at teaching how to take 100 lives and how to make $500,000. And then Met might have been good at, when Met was there, they might have been good at how to take that and cross-sell. And then you have Prudential that might have been good at XYZ, or New York Life that was good at. And so what it does is what you've done is you've created an agnostic platform that other companies, that when they don't have a point guard, I go back to my sports analogy, when I don't have a point guard or I don't have a center, I can borrow them from you. And it's the best of the best, right? And so that's allowed for that agnostic platform. There's a need in the industry for that type of platform that now you saw the need because obviously you continue to get new members and people are super excited about it. And it continues to be one of those things that actually it pops up on my phone every morning and it pops up, the next one is this one, your next one is this. So the cadence is good. And it kind of keeps track of you and those type of things. But you guys have taken it to the next level, right? And so there are pieces in there for leaders to also do assignments and things that they can do with their agents and those type of things. So once you got it, you knew it was going to be a popular thing. How did you guys continue to say, this is something we can potentially take, we can build, we can grow, we can continuously make it just better and better and better and better. Again, why not just build it, grow it, sell it to one of the companies and say, you know what? I've done my job. I've added value back to the marketplace.
Yeah. Well, I guess that would be the easy way out. But, it's so rewarding. I guess that's what drove my career 35 years as a general agent. It's so rewarding to see people develop personally, professionally, and financially. I was able to show them a way which is legal and moral so that they can do everything they want to do for their family, their church, and their community. And I always felt very proud to be able to say that. And, we had nearly a couple hundred agents when I retired, and these people were involved. They were involved with their families. They were able to donate time and money, right, to their church or religious affiliation. They were involved in their communities in important ways. And I always felt that was my great reward. And when you say, why didn't I retire? There's an old story. Bob Hope was asked on his 85th birthday, Mr. Hope, why don't you go retire and go fishing? And he said, fish don't clap. And it just occurred to me that in my case, the clap was the satisfaction of seeing people succeed. And I still get notes all the time. I mean, emails coming in literally from around the world. We just got a client a little over a year ago in Ghana, West Africa. Our first African group was so excited about these people. And you want to see agents that want to learn. It's like all of a sudden they have this fire hose and they can't get it fast enough. And how rewarding that is. And we have these Zoom calls. We have 6 or 8 of the training people on it. And it's like you just gave them gold. And so it's just so rewarding. And I see no reason to quit.
Well, and I think actually that's a really heartwarming way to put it, because I think in so many ways, hope and optimism are not in abundance in today's world. And so you're saying what you're really painting as pictures that true kind of essence of agents and advisors really hasn't changed over the decades, that there are still people out there. I love that what you're saying. You're giving them an opportunity to do that kind of the moral, legal way, and to continue, kind of pushing that light forward. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Which brings up an interesting point, because people tend to be critical of the generation, was the millennials. And, and I say from the main platform all the time, there are still amazing people in every generation. It's maybe a little more difficult to find them because it is a big generation and they're all out of different viewpoints. But remember, only about 20% of the people on the planet can sell anything. So first, it's always been difficult for people like Chris and I, who are in that business of looking for the gold in the mine. It's always been difficult to find that person, but they are there. And so I continue to work with amazing people. We do our interviewing in one of our 2 studios, one in Chicago, one in Florida. And we have people in for these interviews, and people go, holy cows, did you hear what he just said? Did you hear what she just said? It's amazing. The passion comes out, the commitment. Another thing that's extremely important for agent development, as I'm thinking about it, is systems, structure, and routine. And when you talk to successful people, that's what you hear about. You hear about how their day goes. every day isn't different. Every day is very similar, and so there are numerous stories about people. I get up at 5:30, I go off on my run, I come back, I cool down while I read the paper, then the kids come down, we have breakfast. I have breakfast with the kids, they're off to school, I get dressed, go to the office, I'm there at 8:30, I'm on the phone dialing at 9 o'clock, my first appointment's at 11, my second one's at 1, third one's at 3, every day is the same. And if I go out that night, let's say I go down to watch the Bulls play, and I get home at midnight, still get up 5:30, do my run, have breakfast with the kids. The day is, you repeat this, not that person who goes out with their buddies on the night that evening and decide to sleep in the next morning. That's not what this is about, right? So it's the discipline that comes from this notion that, in my 10 rules of life, rule number 2 is that we're all basically lazy. And people laugh when I say that. But the reality is that successful people, still inherently lazy, will look for ways to set up their environment for success. So, and that's what you do. It's that discipline of setting the clock and never touching it. So it's going to go off at 5:30. It's that discipline. If you decide, you're going to work out every day, that you do that. And so successful people just have found ways to create an environment where they can succeed. And so it just becomes critically important.
So Harry, I'm not going to touch that 10 rules of life. I'm not going to touch that one. Is there a book coming? Do we have that? Is that the secret sauce? Where is that? Where's that stashed?
Actually, the Gamma NAIFA has the book. I donated the book to Gamma before the merger, and it's called The Road to the Bountiful Life. And you can buy it online, I'm sure. I've donated the book at all proceeds. But there are many, many great tips in the book. But it does start out with the 10 rules of life.
10 rules of life.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The Hoopis rule. Yeah.
Do you know the 10? Of course.
Well,
I have right. Yeah. You're right. Right. So we will ask you a couple other ones as we go along.
Okay.
Let's jump to the award. I mean, you were the first recipient, correct, Suzanne? Correct me if I'm wrong. You were the first recipient of this very prestigious award.
The first recipient from the Hoopis network. Yeah, but not
the Hoopis network. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But let's jump to the award. So I was there that night, and you received it, and you told a couple stories, specifically a couple that were pretty interesting and really, really moving. Your family was there. So share with us a little bit about what that award meant to you, and ultimately now what it meant to receive that award and now be able to now present it to someone else.
Yeah, well, it was quite an honor. I could tell you anecdotally that the committee, the aiding committee, recently met, and when I saw the process, I actually wondered, how did I get through this process? And so I was more honored after sitting on the committee than I was in receiving it, if you know what I mean. So one of the key stories about the John Newton Russell Award is that I had been introduced to it by my predecessor, general agent, John Todd. And John Todd was presented the John Newton Russell Award in 1969, I believe was his year of entry. He retired as managing partner, general agent. I took over the office. And in one of my very first meetings, John told me about the John Newton Russell Award, explained it as best he could. And he said, this would be a wonderful goal for you. And I said, I'll be lucky if I'm here in 3 years. Never mind win the John Newton Russell Award. So let's put that on hold for now. And so to be quite honest, and I suppose this is true, I was the 81st recipient. The very first recipient was Solomon Huebner, the brilliant educator and founder of the American College. And the array of people, as you look down the list, were, managers, educators, agents, people by and large who gave back to the industry in a variety way. So there was no one path to the John Newton Russell. It made it even more of an honor to receive it. And to think, there are only 81 people since 1940 that received the award makes it what it is. Really fabulous.
So what? Let me ask this. The award now you serve as a part of the committee. So you could have took the award and just walked away. God bless, and kind of said thank you. And you have a unique ability to service over self, right? Even though you benefit and there's things that happen along the way, you're continuously jumping back in and saying, okay, how can I be a part of this process? How can I add more? What can I do? So that has to come from a mentality. Can you share with us a little bit about where that mentality kind of comes from? Did you get it from your parents? Was it part of you growing up? Or share with us a little bit about where that comes from.
Well, I suppose you can never discount the value that your parents bring in your early stages of development. In our case, my father and mother owned the family grocery store, small supermarket. He called it a supermarket because he said supermarkets had 2 or more cash registers, and he had 2. So that qualified him. That was his own definition of a supermarket. And so I was raised, by the age of 6, I was working in the store, usually down in the basement, sorting bottles out because it was more like daycare. My mother worked in the store, and they had to bring me along, and if I wasn't in school, I was at the store. And so there was a story that my father worked real hard. I mean, it was 90-hour-a-week schedule, 6.5 days a week. Which obviously included Sunday morning. So the whole family was dedicated to this. And I guess one day I asked my father, I said, why do you do this? And he kind of knew exactly what I meant. He was exhausted, never had a family vacation. We didn't have an automobile. We had a truck because the truck was needed for the store. And so I said, Dad, why do you do this? And he looked at me without hesitation. And he said, son, because it's important for me to turn the doorknob on my own business. And it was the sacrifice that I witnessed. And so when I think of the magnitude of that, and then you can tie this into, in my case, my grandparents who migrated from it, in my mother's side from Italy, my father's side from Greece. And they come to the United States, you hear the story repeatedly. They come without a dime, and somehow they make a living, and I'm the beneficiary of it. And I used to say to my agents, do you realize how lucky we are to be here? And you can't make one more phone call? You can't dial that phone one more time? My Italian grandfather got on a ship, left his wife and his firstborn son in Italy for 3 years while he made enough money to bring them to the United States. Everybody's got their story. So when that is what your roots are, that's the base. Now you say, okay, how do I serve? How do I give back? And that's part of it. The fact is, I don't fish, and I'm not a really good golfer, but I do like it. But if that's all I had to do every day, I'd probably just wither away. And I do believe that it's far more important and exciting to be able to make contributions throughout your lifetime, not your career, your lifetime. And this idea that we help people in so many ways. Back in 1980, I began a campaign in my agency, and we called it Building to a Billion. And the billion was $1 billion of life insurance face amount sold in 1 year. And the year I began doing that, I think I ranked in Northwestern's top 10, and we did 100 million. And I said as my goal that by 1990, 10 years later, we would do 1 billion. And, I started talking about that, and that same predecessor, John Todd, who I mentioned with the John Newton Russell Award, John was 75 years old at that time, and he looked at me and said, "Young man, what are you smoking?" Because I didn't even know he'd understand the reference to smoking marijuana, but he did. And but 11 years later, we did it. And to my knowledge, we were the first agency to produce $1 billion of life insurance in a single year. We didn't make it by 1989. It took a couple more years, but we actually achieved that goal. Now, looking back, when I retired, we had nearly $50 billion that we put in force in my company. And if you want to dissect that a little bit, you think about the hundreds of thousands of policy owners and the beneficiaries and the lives we changed, whether because of death or disability or retirement. I mean, you just have to feel good about that all the time. And so that was what we did, and that's why we did it.
And I'll even expand on that, Harry. If you think about the people, the next generation that you've set up for success because of the impact indirectly you've had because of the agents, because of the education, because of the knowledge, that's a nation. That's as big as some of the nations out there. So you think about that is the impact that you guys have had, not only in the industry, but in humanity, because without us, those people wouldn't do the work. And how many people's lives did we save and families have we saved from hardship and financial ruins because of the work we've done. So congratulations on that. I mean, that's super impactful. Mentors. So you mentioned your journey along the way. Who's been a mentor of yours? Although everybody needs a coach, right? And so,
everybody needs a coach. Yeah.
So who would you say has been your most challenging mentor? Someone who's really pushed you to just be the best version of you?
Yes. Well, there have been several over the years. The very first one was in my agency in Rhode Island, where I first was a college intern and then full-time. His name was Israel Franklin. He would always say, "If you name your child after me, I'll buy all the baby furniture." He never had a taker, but he was a sweetheart of a guy. And when he retired, he had written 4 lives per month for 500 months in a row. 4 lives, never missed, for 500 months. So you just think about that. What an amazing accomplishment. So he was one of those 2 I mentioned earlier that was doing 100 lives. You know, the 4 a month was a minimum, but he was always over 100 lives producing. And he became a real inspiration to me. He was probably, he was 60 at least, and I was 21. You know, so this guy took me under his arm and helped me through those early years. And I never, ever forgot the contribution that he made to my development. Second person that was very important was a home office executive by the name of Larry Letourneau. He's more like the one you just asked about. He was the challenging guy. He was the one that would press you. He'd question all of your thoughts and theories. He'd make you explain it. He'd never take it at face value. He always wanted to know more about what you were thinking, and he wasn't afraid to tell you when you were wrong. So I worked for Larry in the home office for 2 years as a direct report to him, and he had an amazing impact. And then as my career went on, I had the opportunity to meet Don Clifton, and Don Clifton was a PhD psychology professor at the University of Nebraska. You say, well, how did I meet him? But he actually formed a company called Selection Research, SRI, as it was known, had a selection test for agents and leaders in any industry, but one specific to our business. And I was introduced to that test. It was an interesting one because it was 250 questions, which were asked in a couple-hour period and recorded on a cassette tape. And we would send them to Lincoln, Nebraska, where someone would analyze them and send back recommendations. And even in those days, talking 1979, 80, that was a $175 test. It was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But the thought was, if I'm going to invest all this time in the people, and I often question why companies don't put more teeth into their selection testing and profiling. When you think about the enormous amount of money companies do put into new agent development, to think you're going to put this on the wrong person is terrible. So Don Clifton ran a workshop in Lincoln called the Premier Agency Workshop, and I attended as a student. 2 years later, I was on his faculty, and I did that for several years. Now, here's how Don would explain this, and it's very important. He'd say, if you want to measure productivity, there's a formula. He said, the formula is this. If you want high productivity, that equals taking the right talent. Okay, so he put a T on the board, and he talked about talent. And what is the talent? It's the right person doing the right job. It's getting somebody that has a propensity to succeed in the life insurance business. That was talent. That's what he did. His test, his profile, was to help you determine if that person had the right talent. Then he said, you multiply that by the sum of E, expectation, high expectations, plus a relationship, because you can't have expectations of a person without a relationship. And you raise that to the second power by recognition. And he said recognition wasn't, the trophy or winning a contest. The recognition was constant, pointing out when somebody was doing the right thing, catching people doing the right things, congratulating them on small achievements, understanding what drove them. A lot of people would say it would be far more important for me to give a portrait of a family, right? Say it's my top agent, and instead of giving that person a trophy, if I gave them a portrait of their family, would have far more meaning than that trophy. But knowing that was how he specialized in the recognition. He said, so if you could take that formula now, if you have to have high expectations and you have to have a relationship in order to make that work. So Don was, he was funny. He was thoughtful. He would always say, he said, people change, but seldom. And he would challenge you to say this: when was the last time you changed as much as you're asking someone else to change? And when you put it in that situation, you realize that my job as a general agent was much more challenging. It was far more difficult. You can just, okay, change. Well, you don't change, but you can manage. And he would always say this, right? You manage weakness, you develop strengths. This happens in sports, better than I, Chris, right? You take a talent, you want to work that skill, you want to work the things they do well, and you manage the weakness. You might manage it with another player if it's a team sport, right? Maybe in golf, you'd manage it because you're going to show a perfect swing, but you're also going to have this, another soft hands around the green, and you teach someone to manage that stuff. So that was one of his themes all the time: develop the strength and manage the weakness. And so he was a very significant player that way, and probably my most meaningful mentor.
Well, I wrote a lot down there, Suzanne. Hopefully, everyone out there in NAIFA land wrote those down. Those are playing back. Those are going to be good nuggets. Our goal of this podcast is to enhance the lives of the professionals that listen and dedicate their lives to the association. So talk to me a little bit about your relationship and how'd you get involved with NAIFA? And if you're talking to advisors out there about NAIFA today, what would you say? Why get involved? Why not just, just sign up for the membership and say, I'll listen to a podcast here and there,
Well,
talk to me a little bit about that.
It's extremely important to look at all the associations. In my acceptance speech for the John Newton Russell Award, I said that at a very early stage in my career, and I mentioned this earlier, I realized that getting your CLU designation was important. It seemed to me, if you're going to be in a business, that this would be important, that you would have the designation of that career. $1 million roundtable. It was important to be among the best in the business and to be affiliated with the best in the business. And as it came to NAIFA, it was very clear. You have an advocacy group who's improving the business you're in that you've chosen. It's providing you with educational opportunities, numerous opportunities for meeting other people in the business, sharing ideas, study groups and all of that. It would seem to me you should be in that group. So as an agency, we were a 100% agency for the entire time that I ran the office. And I literally had people leave the office. I don't want to say I threw them out. I let them leave because they weren't going to pay the dues. And I said, no freeloaders in my organization. You got to pay your way. And so you have to, as you look at any career, there are certain things, certain principles, the basics. You say you can't do it without this. Why should I let someone else plow this field for me? I should be at the front. I should be pulling the plow. And I think that's what NAIFA does. You got a lot of people who spend a lot of time doing remarkable things for a long time. And I would tell you this also, that most people don't know it. But, 60 years ago, roughly speaking, Gamma was formed by NAIFA. Went back when it was NALU. So it was the NALU organization that actually created a leadership division, which became known as Gamma. And so that's important history. And so that was my branch. I was on the board of Chicago NAIFA, NALU again at the time. I think it was 1980, 81, 82. With Rab Johns was president. I was the vice president. And I still have a picture of he and I doing one of these half marathon runs to raise money for NAIFA. It's actually, he sent me that picture a number of years ago. He had gone through his files and came across it. And so I spent, 8 to 10 years on the NAIFA board in various capacities, never to the national level. As luck would have it, I went to a Gamma meeting and kind of got hooked because of the leadership development side, but always been, very close, still a contributing member and ACT donor. So.
Thank you so much for your contribution, not only to the industry, but you've spoken some wonderful words here. I wish we had more time. I think, for the respective time, Suzanne, I think we are unfortunately out of time. I'd love to have Harry back for round 2 so we can really get into the weeds of kind of where he thinks the industry is going.
Yeah.
And really how advisors today can set themselves aside, because I'm sure he's got some prolific thoughts around that. But those Harry, would you give us another couple rules of life before we get to that can help us mold our disciplines?
Well, look, Chris, the rules of life came about over a period of perhaps it was 30 years. The very first rule of life is you can lie to anyone you choose to lie to, but if you lie to yourself, you lose. And those words were first spoken to a young advisor who was trying to convince me that he was keeping, 60 appointments a month, but couldn't make a sale. And I said, well, it looks like you're fudging your numbers, and that's not going to work. You got to tell the truth here. If you tell the truth, I can coach you. I can help you. The second rule of life I mentioned, that we're all basically lazy. And again, people think that's, they think it's kind of funny. And some will say, well, that's not true of me. The corollary is that people set up their environment to assure their success, because inevitably we know that when we go shopping, we want the parking space closest to the door. There are so many examples of how our basic laziness manifests itself, and you just have to learn to avoid that. Yeah. Rule number 3, and the 3 rules existed alone for about 10 years. And the third rule is that the mind migrates towards that which is most pleasing. And what that meant, and the reason it became a rule, was what I found about agent development was I had to get them to commit to a certain activity that they would do every day. regardless of with whom they did it. In other words, if you're going to see 3 people a day, I don't care what their profession is. I don't care what their income is. I want you to get in the habit of seeing 3 people a day, because eventually what happens is the mind will say, well, if I'm going to see 3 people a day, maybe I should listen to what Harry's telling me and I should get some good referrals. And now I'm going to be seeing 3 strong prospects a day, right? Or if I'm going to make 40 dials a day, which for many years was the standard of performance, if I'm going to do 40 dials a day, I have to commit to getting good names. And if I don't, when I run out of names to call, that's what they would always say, I ran out of names to call. And Chris, with 8 million people around Chicago, I don't think you run out of names to call. I'd make them open up the white page directory at the time. I say, well, if you only have 35 names, then pick 5 out of the white pages and call those. And after a few days, they say, this is ridiculous. I might as well get better people. So those are the first 3.
Those are great. Those are great. So those of you, Harry's book is out. Go get it. Right. What's it called, Harry? The Road
to the Bountiful Life.
Bountiful Life. Wonderful.
And the Bountiful Life is having the time and money to do the things you want to do with your friends and family. That's the definition. Having the time and money to do the things you want to do with your friends and family.
Awesome. So Suzanne, before we go to the lightning round with Mr. Harry Hoopis, and Harry, I'll share with you what it is. But Suzanne, do you have any other questions for Mr. Hoopis? Because I may have to splice this up a little bit, because I think we're having a little bit audio in and out a little bit.
The only, I have a million questions, but the one that's really top of mind to me, Harry, is from whence do you get your patience? Because everything you're saying here, it sounds like a lot of patience and allowing people to develop and look. I mean, I know you're selecting for talent already, but you have a certain amount of patience. It sounds like you've always been able to employ. So how have you done that and not gotten frustrated?
That's really a great question, because the reality is I have very little patience with people who don't listen and do what I tell them.
So you're quick.
So again, right? It's the if I have a way that's legal and moral, so that you get everything you want out of life and make a contribution to your family, your church, and your community, will you do what I tell you to do? And so one of my practices in the organization was, if you're going to fail around here, you have to fail my way. So in other words, I'm going to tell you my formula for success. You're going to follow it. If you don't follow it, you're going to leave. I had no tolerance for people who wanted to do it their own way, right or wrong. I mean, a lot of people, I had to run it where I had passion to believe in it, and then I could invest in people, and as you say, appear to be patient. So.
Right, good veneer. But you've already they've selected in, and to Chris's point that he always says, is it convenient or are you committed? They're committed. So then you have a two-way street of commitment and development. You already have the coach-player relationship established. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, so that led to their success or their likelihood. Right? All right, so let's go to the lightning round, Harry. This is a quick round, basically top of mind. So I know you didn't write these. I'm not going to ask you any really difficult questions. I'm not going to ask you any political questions. I'm not going to ask you how do you feel about certain things. This is just 100%. People know Harry Hoopis, the legend, the myth. They don't know Harry Hoopis, the person, right? So the goal of this is just to give someone a little bit of flavor, kind of who you are, and kind of what kind of makes your swag kind of good, right? So with that being said, we'll start off with one that's simple. What did you tell your son Peter that talked him into following your footsteps in the insurance and financial services industry? That was
I think it was the example that I set. It wasn't so much telling him; he told me. And I think that's interesting, because again, it's the example. He saw somebody that was happy in his work, and apparently successful. And I think he naturally saw it as a good avenue for him.
Okay. So you see that one was simple. So here we go. All right. So, Harry, you're in Chicago. I don't know if you're still in Chicago. I know you were in Chicago a long time, but we have to go Bulls or Blackhawks?
Bulls or Blackhawks? Bulls.
Okay, Bulls over Blackhawks. All right, we have to go back to Chicago sports. Cubs or White Sox?
Cubs now. Yeah.
Okay, so now we understand, where your alliances lie and with sports. But if someone was started in the business today, what would be the one piece of advice you would give young, aspiring, future superstar?
I don't have one piece of advice. I have way too much advice. But here's what I would tell them very quickly, because I really would like to make this known. I'd tell them to follow the DAD formula for success. And the DAD formula was very simple. Acronym for the D is desire. And desire is the heart. And that's deciding what it is that's important to you. Why will you be successful? This is not about selling a life insurance policy. It's about providing a benefit to a person and or your family. So first, find that desire. What drives you? Second is your attitude. And that is your mind. That's the brain of the operation. Successful people have to have an unflappable attitude. They can't get up too high. They can't get down too low. They have to stay base simple. Dr. Robert Elliott said, why pay the price of hatred when a little dislike will do? Leo Biscaglia said, I know people whose day is ruined if they miss one section on a revolving door. You can't operate that way. And then the third D is discipline. And discipline is the muscle. And the muscles have to be developed. So you don't expect all of it at once. You're not going to run the marathon on your first time out the door, but it's going to take training. And that discipline is where those habits come from. And the habits become the key to the muscle development, right? So good habits are hard to form and easy to live with. Bad habits are easy to form and hard to live with. So we want to develop good habits.
Both are habitual. Harry, if you could go back in time and have dinner with anybody, whether they're living now or they passed away, anybody in history, who would you want to say, I'd want to have dinner with to have a conversation?
Wow. But there are a lot of choices.
Yeah. Just one.
Just one. Probably Aristotle. I've always been fascinated by Greek philosophers, and Aristotle was the father of all philosophy. I think that would be really intriguing to be able to have dinner with him.
Wonderful. Mr. Harry Hoopis, thank you so much for your time. But I have one last question. So you're from Chicago. So question is, deep dish pizza or thin crust pizza?
Oh, no doubt. Deep dish all the way.
He's legitimate. Yep.
So, Suzanne, do you have anything before we close? We'll give Harry a shot to kind of close us up, and then I'll wrap us up.
Well, Harry, you're probably a descendant of Aristotle. That wouldn't surprise me at all, right?
It could be.
the connection. So, no, thank you so much for all that you've done, and I think this is going to be so inspirational for so many people out there. Let's bring more people into the practice, into the business.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Harry Hoopis, closing words on your part.
Well, a lot of we've all been taught to practice the golden rule, and I think that's a wonderful thing. But we profess to the platinum rule, and the platinum rule said that if I can help you get what you want out of life, I will get what I want out of life, because those things can be different, but they're okay. So the golden rule is you do unto me as I do unto you. But the platinum rule says, let me take care of your needs, and then my needs will be met. And that'll be my closing remark.
Thank you, Mr. Harry Hoopis. So if we were going to the Hall of Fame, this will be one guy that's definitely already in, and we want to see his success continue to run. Thank you so much, Mr. Harry Hoopis. Thank you, Suzanne. I'm one of your co-hosts, Chris Gandy. Thank you for tuning in to Advisor Today podcast, where we uplift and promote the lives of a financial advisor so we can make the lives of others a better place. Go out and be better human beings than all the other people, and love everyone. God bless. Have a good week. And thanks for tuning in to Advisors Today podcast.
Thanks for joining us for NAIFA's Advisor Today podcast series. Make sure to subscribe to get future episodes. And if you're interested in coming on the show, let us know.